First Lady Casey DeSantis, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks for letting me be here. And please tell Ben hello. I'm a big fan.
We will. So can you fill us in what is going on here today in Miami?
So in Miami, we're doing a couple of things, one of which we were out in the Everglades earlier today hunting pythons. Wow. So a lot of people don't know this, that the pythons are really invading the Everglades and they're eating all the critters there, and they've really become an invasive species. So we went in with a python challenge and we were out there hunting these things with about 800 other folks from 32 states across the nation. There's some prize money, but it's really trying to continue the governor's initiatives and everything that he's done to protect the environment. We put $3.3 billion into Florida's environment, but particularly protecting the Everglades. So we've done $1.7 billion in water quality, and we say that is really important. It is the lifeblood of the state, but at the same time, these pythons are wreaking havoc down there, so we're making sure we're doing everything that we can. So when you asked where I was today, I was out hunting pythons, and then from that we went and we did a big event with a bunch of mamas in Miami.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit more about this event with the mamas in Miami, because you've been doing a lot of work rallying these mamas to come out to vote. Can you share a little bit about what that's been like?
You know why? Is because mamas are fired up. Everywhere I go, a mama says, how can I get involved? How can I help support the DeSantis agenda? How can I support what he's done on education? And I think it really was COVID that allowed a lot of these moms to peer into the classroom for the first time and to see what was being taught without their consent and behind their backs. And it's one thing when you come after a mama, it's another thing when you come after her kids. And so people were coming out of the woodwork to support. And so we said, how can we corral all of these folks together to try to march on behalf of the governor to have a slam dunk election? Because I think everybody looks back and they remember what 2018 was like, right? It was a nail biter. It got down to 32,000 votes, a half a percentage point between the way Florida has gone, which is a bastion of freedom and a light to the entire world, versus what would have happened had the other person had been elected. And it would have been worse than places like California, Illinois, Michigan, and New York. And so we know what's on the ballot. Freedom is on the ballot. And one of the biggest groups of folks that's going to help us get to where we ultimately want to be with a slam dunk election are mamas.
Right. And you're a mother of 3 yourself, right?
Yes.
So as a mother, can you share with us, what are the issues that are most important to mothers when they're voting?
There's a lot. I mean, one of which is public safety, right? You see a lot of these other states defunding and demonizing law enforcement. In Florida, we have the blues back. We've done everything from $5,000 bonuses for folks in other states who are tired of the way that they're treated, can come to Florida and be a part of the solution in law enforcement here in Florida. You look at education, one of the things I'm the most passionate about. We should not be indoctrinating these kids. We should be educating them. And so you look at the anti-CRT legislation that was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, the transparency in education, which is one of the most important things. Now you have families have the right to be able to sue a school district if they're not being transparent in what they're teaching your kids or what's being put in your children's library. Those are really great foundational legislation pieces that the governor has enacted. The civics education is really important. That's something that I think we have to be teaching our kids, because they, after all, are going to be the ones that inherit this great nation. So if they don't understand where our rights come from, if they think that they come from government gives us the right to speak. You've seeded the entire American Revolution. We need to be teaching these kids that our rights come from God, and it's up to government to protect our rights. And especially when we saw things like what happened during COVID, when you had a lot of these governors in other states who were usurping the rights of the people and denying them the ability to be able to see their loved ones at the end of their lives in nursing homes and hospitals based on no science and data. And it was really just very scary. So I think there's a lot on the minds of mamas in the ballots, knowing that we're investing billions of dollars also in improving the environment in Florida. We understand that Florida, the waterways are the lifeblood of the state, and it's our obligation to leave Florida better to our kids and God than we found it. Also, the enforcement of the rule of law. You saw the other day the governor went and suspended a state attorney who wasn't upholding his oath to the Constitution, the U.S. and the state, by not interpreting or enforcing laws that he was required to do. So the governor went in and suspended him. So I think if you want bold leadership, if you want somebody who believes in individual rights and liberties, who understands the way our government was created and our foundational principles, I think there's just a lot on the ballot that people are going to be turning out in droves for. And the other thing I think is really important is, honestly, this election is about solidifying the policies of everything that the governor has done. He just appointed his 6th state Supreme Court justice just today, Justice Renatha Francis, who, by the way, is the embodiment of the American dream. This woman is phenomenal. She's Jamaican-born, worked her way up through law school. Her mother didn't even graduate from high school, but she had a strong foundation, and she was able to achieve great things, excelled in education, and became a state Supreme Court justice. Only in America does this happen, where you have somebody who's like that. So I just think there's a lot of potential and a lot of great things that are going on in the state of Florida.
So let's talk about COVID a little more, because like you were saying, parents are very motivated by what happened during the coronavirus pandemic to get out and vote. We're hearing media talking about this growing movement of parents who media describes as kind of skeptic and doubtful and radical based on their experiences during COVID. What do you make of this?
Doubtful and radical as far as what?
About vaccinations, about lockdowns, about health officials and the way they talk about pandemics. Why is media...
They should be skeptical of the, quote, health officials during COVID, because everything that they told us was basically a lie. I mean, they said, wear the masks, it'll stop transmission, take the vaccine and you won't get sick and you won't transmit. And we're looking at a president who still to this day is testing positive for COVID after having 4 jobs. They were tying people's jobs to the COVID vaccine when they knew that the science, and you hear this from Birx, wasn't what they thought, what they said it was. And so I think, yeah, people have a right to be very skeptical. Honestly, when you talk about public health officials, they've done an immense disservice to the benefit of society because they've been repeatedly wrong on so many things, but they haven't had the fortitude to be able to come out and admit that they were wrong. And so I think parents are very upset by that. The other thing were these mask mandates. When you look at the masks, I mean, Fauci from the very beginning, he knew that these things didn't work. It's like putting a chain link fence in front of a gnat thinking that you're going to stop it. But they never acknowledged the ramifications of what those masks were doing to our kids, the emotional toll that it was taking, because never before have we taken away the ability for kids to be able to see and receive a smile. The fact that they're constantly touching their face. Even Fauci admitted that from the beginning. Oh, you're touching their face and the schmutz and all of this. The kids were coming home and they had swapped masks. That's not very sanitary. There's actually a group of moms in Florida who took those masks and brought them to a lab to have them tested. And they found all kinds of bacteria and E. coli and all of these things that were in there. And so now they're admitting, too, the developmental delays. Kids aren't able to speak as well. They started some of those critical years in kindergarten, first grade, with a mask on their face and not the ability to be able to see their teacher. And so it really is just disgusting when you look at public officials who will stand up there and take their mask off, right? And they'll do a press conference. Randy Weingarten was quoted as saying, I want people to be able to hear me better, so I'm going to take off my mask. And at the same time, they were forcing and advocating for kids to be muzzled and teachers to be muzzled. It was just an atrocity for what a lot of folks did to those kids, and I am so proud of the governor to stand strong with no vax mandates and no mask mandates from the very beginning.
And you also spoke about Governor DeSantis' policy decisions lately, kind of diving into the culture wars. Why are we seeing so much sexualization of children, so many radical concepts in the classroom, in television, in media, social media, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram?
I don't know. I think the governor said it best, that are we doing so well with reading, writing, and arithmetic that we think that we need to be injecting gender ideology down the throat of a 4-year-old? We don't. And so that's why they've really passed the legislation where we have parental rights in education, which basically says that those kids are not going to be exposed to those things at an early age, and that parents have the right to be able to know what's being thrown in front of them in the form of curricular transparency. And if they're not getting it, they can sue the school districts.
I'd love to get your take on this new phrase we keep hearing, gender-affirming care. And that's what Democrats and activists use to describe transgender sex change surgeries, hormones, often in the context of kids. So one, I'd love to hear from you. Why
It's abuse.
This phrase.
It's not gender affirming care. I think that that's another talking point from the left. But if you look at the warning from the FDA for something like puberty blockers, those puberty blockers can cause brain swelling and permanent blindness. And that's just what we know about these things. But they're giving it to these kids in experimental form. And then these kids are going to take these for a generation, and we'll find out what happens when 80% of this gender dysphoria resolves itself. And then you talk about performing these procedures of double mastectomies and castrating these young boys, again, knowing that this stuff, this gender dysphoria resolves itself, then they're forced to live with this for the rest of their life. I agree with 100% what the governor said about the doctors who are performing those surgeries. They should be sued.
They should be sued. And why? Why is this being pushed right now?
Your guess is as good as mine. I think it's just all part of an agenda that the left is pushing. But I'll tell you, the American people, and moms especially, don't like it. And we don't like it when it's being forced in front of our kids, particularly our kindergartners, without our consent or knowledge. It's wrong. And in Florida, it ain't happening. I think there's also something to be said. You mentioned about the culture. One of the things that the governor and myself have been very invested in is the fatherhood crisis we're seeing across the nation. We've invested $61 million in a lot of mentorship programs. I have an initiative called Hope Florida, where we're working primarily with struggling single moms to provide their kids mentors to be able to facilitate the opportunity for them to live up to their God-given potential and the American dream by having a father figure. I've had, through the Department of Juvenile Justice, kids who come through that system. These are kids that have been just in dire straits. They've been abused and they've been neglected, but they come through the Department of Juvenile Justice in the form of a youth ambassadors program. And they all stop at the mansion once they graduate. And these are kids who now are pillars of society. They're class presidents. They're the first kids in a generation in their family to be able to go to college. And I ask them all the same question. I say, what was it that made you turn your life around from where you are to where you are today? And they all give me the exact same answer. They say, someone at some point took an interest in my life. And so, unfortunately, government can't and shouldn't fix all problems, but honestly, if there is something that we can do, we can incentivize mentorship for a lot of these kids to be able to have that connection with a father figure.
And tell us a little more about this Hope Florida Pathway to Freedom. Is it a Pathway to Freedom?
So it's Hope Florida, Pathway to Prosperity, Economic Self-Sufficiency, and Hope. So it dates back to really 2019 when the governor was first elected. And I traveled around the state because I wanted to learn more about the child welfare sphere. In particular, in the state of Florida, we have 16.5 million people of faith, 20,000 institutions of faith, and they are doing wonderful things. But we wanted to bring them to the table in a meaningful way. So we created and worked with a group who has something called Care Portal. A Care Portal is basically the faith-based community on speed dial. So let's say Sally, who's coming into the system through the Department of Children and Families, she is a struggling single mom. She doesn't have bunk beds. She doesn't have mattresses. Her kids are having a hard time eating. She can't put food on the table. What a Hope Navigator will do will take those needs, input them into the system, and then a real-time alert will go to those participating faith and community-based organizations. And what happens then is those institutions can deliver those needs directly to Sally's doorstep. So they'll show up with bunk beds, mattresses, and a warm cooked meal. So not only are you looking beyond government to help support, you're also doing a great thing on behalf of Sally. And what's interesting is that we find that those requests into the Care Portal are only, by and large, inputted and executed once. And you would think, well, certainly Sally has other needs. There are the things that she might, gas cards, with Biden and inflation and gas prices, and there's clearly more things that she needs. But what we found is there's a connection that has been made between Sally and the participating faith organizations, and they cannot unsee what they saw. And those faith-based communities are not going to let Sally or her kids go hungry again. So again, government can exit stage right, which is wonderful. You're connecting the dots and getting out of the way. It not only benefits Sally, it really helps the faith-based community because that fulfills their mission, and it helps society as a whole, and it benefits the state of Florida.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. We so appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.